Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissack and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing? You just
Doing
got
good.
back from your big trip?
Got back from big trip, had 5 hours sleep, but I feel amazing. So we'll do an episode all about Greece and the footsteps of Paul and John Maxwell and all the great things. But I'm super excited today because you blew my phone up, making sure I was going to be back for Greece for our guest today. So why don't you introduce our guest, if you will?
Yes, absolutely. I am so excited to have my friend Taylor Davis on today. Taylor just wrote a book called Parable for the Republic, and it's out. It's on Amazon and wherever you can find books, I think, Taylor. And so really excited to have you on. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a avid listener of the podcast and pretty much everything Dana Gentry. So I'm excited to
That's awesome.
be here. My wife is as well. So it's super exciting and an honor to be on with you all today.
I will say too, Taylor, if your baby ever goes missing, it's probably at my house. Like, I've never wanted, Linda, if you could see their son, he just turned 1. He is the cutest baby you've ever seen in your whole life. I mean, so cute.
We should
Thank
take
you. Yeah, he's our big chunky boy we always dreamed about. So he's a happy baby. He's doing great. He said dada right before Father's Day, which was special. So that was cool. And then he just had his first birthday. He loved his smash cake, and it's the greatest blessing.
That's great.
I mean this in the cutest way, Linda. His legs are like rolls upon rolls upon rolls, like the cutest ever.
Yeah, he started walking a little bit in his walker, so he's lost a couple of the rolls, which is sad. But he's still got the good solid thigh rolls, which everybody loves.
That's the only time in his life anyone will say it's so sad he's losing his rolls because he's
know.
more. We can all take a lesson from him. We should all walk more. We might lose the rolls.
That's right.
So true. Well, Taylor, Linda always kind of starts with her opening question. Linda, you want to go for it, and then we'll dive into the book.
Taylor, you're young enough too. You don't even have to do the Cliff Note version, but we always like to say you were born and then what happened. So bring us from there to today. And you're young enough. We don't even have to have Cliff Note version.
Yeah. So I was born in Harrison, Ohio. My parents had a business in Cincinnati, and we lived in Harrison. When I was younger, we moved over to Hebron, Kentucky, where the Cincinnati airport is. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we grew up. I met my wife, Alex, in our little Baptist church, Hebron Baptist Church in Northern Kentucky. I was in 8th grade, and she was a freshman. And we started dating from that point forward and have been together ever since. We went to different high schools, different colleges. She went to UK. I went to EKU, where I played football. And now I'm on the board of the business school. And then my senior year at EKU, I started working in financial services because I had the delusional confidence that people would take financial advice from a college senior. But we just kind of went with it and rolled with it and made it happen. And then she joined my staff after we got married. And then we live in Lexington, have our son Harrison. And a lot of our story is in the book. A lot of stories I have never really told. Really nobody else would know it other than family or maybe people that I really trust. I typically have a pretty small circle of people that I can trust. Just that's the way it is in life and business and politics, I think. And there are stories that I tell in the book from growing up, my childhood, from my professional life, and really how I found what I was called to do, which was to be a talent multiplier. And so that's what we're doing now. And speaking about the book and the parable of talents and how it applies to our modern culture.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait. Oh, that was just enough to make me want to rush out and get that book.
Linda, you're going to just lose it. It's like right up your alley. So I know, and I was like, gosh, I don't want to spoil some of it, but So first thing, Taylor, I wanted to start with what you had in the introduction, because you said that you've studied a lot of great leaders, and Linda and I have too, and it's like one of our favorite things. And you said, but what they all have in common is that they were blessed with some sort of great talent. However, having the talent alone is not the full recipe. It's that they were blessed with some sort of great talent and they put it into action. And I do think sometimes today it seems like people are forgetting the action part. So will you talk a little bit just about that?
Yeah, you see a lot today of people are often all talk and no action, and I'm about that action. I want to see the action in people. But in order to take the action, that's part of what I write about, is the great leaders overcome the fear and anxiety that it takes to take action. And I've met some brilliant people in my life who nobody will ever know how brilliant they are, because they won't overcome the fear and anxiety that it takes to go out and multiply their talent. They've been so conditioned to comfort that the comfort that they're residing in, they're not willing to go through the short-term pain of multiplying. So therefore they suffer by the long-term dull pain of never really becoming who they were called to be. And every one of those great leaders that I've studied, I've been around some personally in my life, but I'm a big history guy. And it doesn't really matter who you look at in history, but if someone was a great leader, they had the quality of being able to act in spite of fear and anxiety. And also they had a tolerance for pressure. They don't let things bother them. They take things personally, but it doesn't slow them down. They use it as fuel and energy to take action. And I write in the book about a period of my life where I would bury my talent because fear and anxiety or anger, I would allow it to subdue me and I would let it stew, and then I wasn't taking action with it. And then I met a guy named John Wright Sr. who basically flipped the key in the ignition and taught me how to internalize that and use it as energy and fuel to go out and multiply. And those are the key factors that every great transformational leader has.
Wow.
Yeah.
So powerful.
So good. Well, I love that you said in the book, I had a couple of things about fear and pressure actually in my notes to ask you about, but I love how you said it's an opportunity cost thing. The Bible says many times, don't be afraid. That doesn't mean not to feel the emotion of fear, but to have faith in God and act in spite of it. And you said, out of fear, I act, because the opportunity cost of inaction is more fear. And I thought, gosh, that's so good.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about my life and career, I mean, even writing the book, I had those normal doubts of, well, somebody might say, how can you write a book at, 30 years old, or where do you get the credibility and that sort of stuff, or, who gives you the authority to write these things? And that fear is very, short term. But the opportunity cost of inaction is looking back at 40 or 50 or 60 or 80 or 90 and saying, what could have been? And that thought of looking back and looking at my 30-year-old self and going, why didn't you just try? Just do something. Who cares if it fails? At least you tried. At least you don't have to look back and say, well, I just didn't have the courage to do it. I just left it on the table. So that opportunity cost of inaction, I think, is the greatest price people pay. And I've heard people say before, many people are dead at 30, but buried at 90. And I just did not want to be one of those people. And I think that there's so many people out there. The reason we've seen the reaction from the book that we have, the reason it sold out on Amazon on release day and they had to refill inventory, is because I think people are hungry for a playbook to fix themselves. And we hear a lot, you'll hear it in social media or on television or by influencers, that you're perfect the way that you are. That's not true. If you're perfect the way that you were, if you had no room for improvement, you'd be happy. You'd be exactly where you are professionally. Your family would be as great as you want them to be. It takes work, but oftentimes we're fed this like get rich quick, fix it quick type scheme. And I think people are hungry for, give me a playbook that's hard and gritty that I can operate within to multiply my talents and get through that fear and beat that opportunity cost.
Well, and I think, Taylor, on the subject of fear, I think a person cannot hear or read enough books that pertain to it, because we all have it.
Yeah.
It's just whether you're going to let it hold you back from giving your gifts to the world. And I think when they always say when the student's ready, the teacher appears.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes people may have to hear people talk about fear, and because you hear every successful person say, I had fear around it and I had to fail my way forward. I didn't just land on success. And that's, scares a lot of people. And I just think there's not enough written about that subject that all of us have. And a lot of times I'll always say, don't compare your inside to someone else's outsides, because we all have insides and they all have limiting beliefs and fears. And so I think there can't be enough books, because you never know which book is going to land with which person. And that's going to be the catalyst that makes them realize, okay, I'm going to have fear, but what I want on the other side is so much bigger than the fear and letting it hold me back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Dana, to your point on the topic of action, the story that I tell in the book about John Wright Sr.'s speech, where I'm sitting in this auditorium at this big, exclusive training event, and he says, we limit how we live so we can limit the amount of anxiety that we face.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like two versions of my life before I heard those words ring out, and the life after. I remember when he said that, it was like time stood still. I was just staring at this guy speaking and thinking, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm limiting how I live so I can limit the amount of anxiety I face. I'm not hiring and building my team the way that I should. I'm not prospecting the way that I should. I'm not reaching out to the people that I should. I'm not just walking up and talking to people that I want to talk to the way I should, because I'm trying to limit the anxiety that I feel. And on the topic of that action to overcome that fear and anxiety, I was speaking to a company about a year ago, and there was a gentleman in the crowd who said, oh, I was at that same training, and but I just didn't really have any sort of big breakthrough.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I said, well, when we were there, the guy who spoke gave us a book. Where's your book? And he goes, oh, it's on my nightstand. And I said, doing what? And he goes, well, I don't know, it's just on my nightstand. I said, is it like a coffee coaster? And he goes, actually, yeah, if I think about it, either I put my coffee on it or my wife puts her Stanley on it, but it's just kind of around. And I said, okay, here's the difference, folks. When you hear a transformational message that would free you, and I'm not picking on this guy, but in the reality of things, if we look at the hard facts of transformational change and multiplying talents, look at it this way. One person heard those words, read the book, and then took it to action.
Yeah.
The other person heard the words, got the book, and used it as a coffee coaster. And then we sit around wondering, how could two people hear the same thing and have a wildly different result? Yeah. And so it always goes back to that initiative, that self-starter attitude to take that action and then go multiply talents.
Yeah.
Wow.
Love it. Love it.
That's huge.
Will you talk a little bit, Taylor, just about, I feel like some people wake up every day and know what their, God-given talents are, and maybe a lot of people don't, quite frankly. And maybe they think that they've changed, or, I don't know. Will you just talk a little bit about how somebody, and it can, I know in the book you talk a lot about like biblically how you can know what those are, but if someone's like, I don't really know what my God-given talents are, because I'm sure we have some listeners that are like that. And I loved in the book, by the way, that you had us do like a little exercise where like you list out, and I did that. Like I wrote them in the book, and I thought, gosh, that's so good. But will you just talk a little bit about that?
I think finding your talent is something that you get kind of from feedback. Like when somebody takes notice of something you're good at, you can say, okay, well, they took notice of that. Therefore, the marketplace objectively sees that talent in me. But if somebody hasn't gotten any sort of that feedback yet, I would go to the future version of you, somebody who's out there, who's where you want to be 10, 20 years from now, and then just have an honest conversation with them about what am I good at and what do you think I need to improve on in order to become the superior alternative version of me that I haven't reached yet. Mm-hmm. And then once you identify what that is, I write in the book about living in the future. I heard Stephen Schwartzman, the founder of Blackstone, say one time that you really have to live and feel the future in the present. And then you wake up one day and it's the reality.
Yeah.
But you have to act and walk and talk and think and speak and believe and prospect and do all the things that you do as if you're already that future self. And then you wake up one day and you are, but you have to feel it in the present. And so for you to identify what those talents are, I think it's having the self-awareness. I think a lot of people just aren't self-aware these days. It's so much of a reactive culture that we don't really have a great grasp on our thoughts, and your ability to control your thoughts and thinking patterns is directly correlated to your destiny and your future outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a very objective look and view of yourself and your talents, you really can't improve what you don't measure.
Yeah.
So if you can measure your level of talent that you were born with or developed over time, then you can identify, well, here's what I need to really hone in on and multiply.
Yeah.
Well, Taylor, I think also, I think sometimes our talents are so easy for us that we think, well, they're not that big a deal, right? We don't really realize, they are a big deal to the world, right? If you use them in the right way. How do you think talents, do you think people have to figure out their talents to wind up figuring out their purpose? And what do you see as the difference of those two?
I don't think God gives us talents unless they're for a purpose.
Gosh, that's good.
I don't think I was given the talent to speak or go on TV and be entertaining as a commentator if I wasn't meant to use that talent for the glory of God or to influence people for the glory of God. If your talent is leading people within a real estate brokerage or a financial services company or an insurance company or a management company or whatever it is, or a bank or a law firm, you weren't given that talent by accident. There's a reason. And I can think back, like when I think about my talent for leadership and developing people, I think, well, I was given that not to help me, but to help the young staff member that we brought on that never really had a father figure to help them uncover their talent and multiply theirs. Wow. And so I think there's a direct correlation between talent and purpose, or else it would just be aimless.
So true. We had Michael Jr. on the cruise with us, and he's the Christian comedian, and him and his wife have a thing called Funny How Marriage Works, and that's kind of what they did for us, which was awesome. But one of the things he told was a story about going to, I guess maybe it's a children's hospital or something, and the grandmother came with her little grandson, and she said to him, now, I just want to warn you, he has a Spider-Man costume on, and he won't take it off, and he won't speak. And so Michael Jr. is kind of getting nervous, thinking, what am I going to do, right? How am I going to make this work? But anyway, he said, what I realized at the end was, if I'd have just dropped a pile of money on that kid's lap, nothing would have changed. But he said by the end of his program, the kid took off his mask, was, participating. And he said, had I not used my gifts,
wow,
we would have not gotten there. It's you could just give something easy like money or whatever, but because I was willing to give my gifts, I was able to reach this kid. And so it just makes you realize that if you're given gifts, there's such an obligation to use those, like you say, for the glory of God, to serve other people. Yeah. And you just don't know who God's going to put in your life that needs exactly the gifts that you've been given. Mm-hmm. So boy, this is so true.
I can think of countless examples, and you all probably can too, of times in your professional career where you don't even think of it, but you're just in flow state. I write about flow state in the book, but you're in flow state where you're like an athlete in the zone. You can't miss. Yep. Everything's clicking just right. And I found that the times in my life where I'm in that flow state, it's when I'm just barely qualified to handle the problem that I'm facing, or the challenge that I'm facing, or the prospect or client that I'm facing, to where you're to the point where you're not overwhelmed, but you're pretty much neck and neck, and things you're in that flow state because you're using those gifts for the glory of God. And I think that when we do that, the Holy Spirit just swarms us with the power of thought that we otherwise wouldn't have. I write in the book about one of the first times I ever went on a national TV network to be a commentator. I don't remember any of it. I completely blacked out. And I tell the story before it went live, and I was terrified. I was praying, help me, Father. Help me, Father. And, give me the words. Use the words through me that I'm called to say. And I just remember being in the interview and thinking, this is going amazing. I don't know what she just asked, but I'm just answering it, and we're just going with it. And at the end of it, I thought that went horrible. They're going to think I'm, a hack or
Yeah.
some goof who doesn't know what he's talking about because I don't remember anything. But then to go home and then see that it went amazing and they asked me to come back on and I had the opportunity to witness to a producer in the green room after. And then, seeing her get saved months later.
Yeah.
That's when I realized, like, when you are using your gifts for the glory of God, the flow state takes over. And it's not us speaking, but the Spirit of our Father speaking through us. And then, we shouldn't be shocked, but we're typically shocked when things go amazingly well in those situations.
That was one of my favorite parts of the book. I had it tabbed. You said cultivating a flow state requires creating the right conditions for optimal performance. This involves setting clear goals, eliminating distractions, engaging in activities that align with your skills and interests, and finding the right balance between challenge and skill level. And I was like, gosh, I can think of so many times where like that's happened, where I've been in that flow state, and I know Linda has too. It's like, but Linda, you sharing that story, and then Taylor, what you just said, I think my favorite, gosh, there were so many great, but one of my favorite top 3 parts in the book was you asked the question, if I died, and this is for people of faith, but you could, if you're not a person of faith, that's okay. You could ask yourself this too. If I died today and met Jesus at the gates of heaven, what would I have to show for the talents that I've been blessed with as it pertains to being a fisher of men and a champion of the gospel? Write it out in the list. And if you're not happy with your answer, then you have work to do to couple with your fit. Like that to me was like, gosh, that's so good, because we know we have these talents and these gifts, but like, how really are we using them to be a fisherman, not just to, make more money or, impact the people closest to us, or like, it really convicted me. It made me think so much like, man, okay, I got a little bit of work to do.
Yeah. That whole part of the book, writing kind of that unlived experience of like a deathbed experience, was one of the things that my coach Sean Wright Sr. did with me when, I write the kind of the funny story in the book of him being like, you're extremely talented and you're a great speaker and you're a wordsmith and you're all this sort of stuff, but something's off because you're not like top of the table in our industry.
Yeah.
Something's off. And it was when he helped me really identify the things the sabotage sedatives that I write about in the book, that I was using to bury my talent. He took me through one of those experiences where he said, imagine you meet your grandfather one day in heaven, because my grandfather dying the way that he did made me a fatalist. It made me think like, tomorrow's not promised. I got to get everything done today. I have to talk to every person I need to. I have to kiss my wife one more time today because tomorrow's not promised. It really changed my entire brain chemistry with that. And I wanted to give that to readers so they could experience it themselves. Of imagine if because tomorrow's not promised. The end of this day is not promised. The end of this hour is not promised. If I were to meet Jesus today and be asked, what did you do with the talents I gave you? Would you be satisfied? Would you actually have something to show for the talents you were given? I also make the point in the book that that's not what gets you into heaven.
Yeah.
The grace of God and belief in Jesus is what gets you into heaven. But it's a hypothetical. If you were asked that, would you have anything to stand on with that talent multiplication inventory? And I think that's a super powerful exercise for anybody to say, okay, I need to wake up.
Yeah.
I need to develop a plan because I just can't live this default life anymore. And you can't really live an extraordinary life with extraordinary faith with ordinary habits.
Yeah.
And that wake up call and that question, that deathbed experience, I think is very powerful and moving for helping people wake up and take action.
Yeah. Dana, the book I was telling you, I think when we were talking on our last podcast, one of the books I was reading is called Regrets. And I think it's by Daniel Pink. I'd have to look it back up and see.
Oh, I love Daniel Pink. Yeah.
But one of the things he says about regrets is they're actually good because, talking, Taylor, about what you were talking about, like doing the exercise, I think is so powerful because you want to get a regret before you're on your deathbed. I think the 5 regrets of the dying is the number one regret is people say not living a life that was true to themselves, but doing what was expected of them by others. And I think that follows the same pattern here. But in this book, Regrets, he talks about you want to learn those regrets. A lot of people say, well, I don't have any regrets and I don't live with regrets. Well, you want to know them before it's too late because once you know a regret, you can go change something. You can go alter your, your trajectory a little bit and correct that regret before it's way too late to do that. So
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty powerful and to do exercises like you're talking about in the book so that you do have a moment to reflect before, because time goes so quickly. And I'm sure these people that were on their deathbed wonder, where did the time go? And how did I not live up to my full potential?
Yeah.
I'm a competitive person, so challenge. Sometimes I create challenge. I love the great clip from The Last Dance about Michael Jordan and the
Yeah.
Chicago Bulls when they tell the story about how he said somebody said something to him, and then he just went into this other mode and just completely demoralized this guy in the game. Somebody asked the other guy after the game, why'd you say that to him? You should have known it was going to make him mad and make him more competitive. Then he goes, I never said a word to the guy. And Michael Jordan actually created that whole conversation in his head to make him more competitive. But when I was sitting with John Wright Sr. and he said, every day you bury the talent, the devil laughs. And that made me so angry and so regretful of that it was a short span, but it was still a span in my life, that it gave me an energy source unlike I've ever found. Red Bull, Celsius, none of them can compete with the anger in your belly that you get from realizing that you've been burying the talent, these precious gifts that we've been given, and letting them go to waste in vain. Once you realize that, I think when a reader realizes that, or somebody who hears me speak about it realizes that, it will set them with an energy source unlike anything they've ever seen.
Yeah. Wow. You actually, my next post-it note in the book, you just said, and it was about the having if you want an extraordinary life, you cannot have ordinary habits. But Taylor, I felt so relatable to you when you said, I'm a work every waking hour type of person, whether it be working on your business, your craft, your discipleship, your relationships, your parenting, your marriage. You mustn't squander a moment. Anything less than exhausting a full use of your energies to multiply your talent is spiritual suicide. There's no rule that says you have to stick to the standard. There's also nothing to back the idea that living a standard life with standard habits will yield anything other than standard results. And I love that so much because sometimes I think we can be made like guilty for having that, like, want to do stuff all the time. Like, I'm always wanting to like have a better marriage and have a better office and make our, and so when I read that, I thought, you know what, like, that's just how God made me. And Linda, you're the exact same way. I know your story of Betty saying, when is enough enough? And you're like, I don't, but it's like, I think when God gives you that inside of you, like, that's not a bad thing. And the way that you wrote that, Taylor, I was like, man, that is so spot on, because anything less than using that full energy would be spiritual suicide. Like, it's not me multiplying my talents.
That is, that's something that I'm really strong in saying, that you have to be unapologetic about.
Yeah.
We don't have to apologize to anybody for our level of focus.
Right.
Because if somebody's not unapologetically focused in being a working every waking moment type person on the different facets of their life, then the people who aren't doing that, well, they're just any moment that they're not working on their craft or their business or their marriage or their family or their discipleship or whatever. The same people who are spectators of that, they're on TikTok, they're watching the news again, they're on Instagram. Yeah. And so I love getting chirps from spectators from the stands who worry about, oh, well, is this too much? And I made the point in the book that the spectators aren't really concerned with your level of work habit. They're really just concerned that you're really running up the score so bad it really exposes their level of focus.
That's so true.
And that's a sabotage sedative that they give themselves as a way out of saying, well, I don't work that hard, but I've got more work-life balance. Well, I've never met anybody who has amazing, perfect work-life balance who has a drastically imbalanced surplus bank account or investment account or anything like that,
Yeah.
or family happiness or anything. The people who go all in on what they do are the people who multiply their talents at the highest level and live the most abundant life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I
true.
love that. Remember, Linda, I don't know where we were, but John Maxwell, I'll never forget when he said this. He said, there's no such thing as a balanced life, yet your life's in seasons. Like
Mhm.
sometimes
Yeah.
you're just always in a different season, but there's no such thing as a perfectly balanced work-life balance or family work-life balance or any of that. And I thought that's so true.
Yeah, I think you can, if you have to control what you can control. You have to be able to
Yeah.
make those shifts. Like when Harrison was born, I did zero work for 2 months. I
Mhm.
might have replied to some emails, but I didn't meet with anybody. I had my team ready to go, everything like that. So we could be, we called it our newborn bubble. It was just us, and we were just at home, and we were just, we'd go out and eat on some patio because it was nice out, and take him. Then we'd go home and just sit with him and look at him and stare at him more and play with him and hold him and everything else. And then I was able to shift it back
Yeah.
to, being unapologetically focused from like 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 on work. And then when I get home, it's zero work. It's all family.
Yeah.
And being able to control that, the knee-jerk reaction and want to jump from thing to thing. Like people who do that are the ones who never really get ahead or gain any traction, because it's always just this juggling game, of never being able to have that unapologetic focus on the task at hand. But I think that the people I know in my life are the most successful. They go all in on the task at hand, and then they come off of it and they go on to the next thing, and then they come back to it. And being able to have the mental self-control to do that and be unapologetically focused is what allows people to multiply their talents at the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, couple last things, and then I just want to, and if there's anything else I'm not asking you that you want to share, but another thing you said in the book that I loved was you said, you talked about President Kennedy, and you said President Kennedy defined happiness as a full use of your powers along the lines of excellence. The idea that one would use their God-given gifts and steward them along lines of excellence and define that as happiness is the ideal profile of a talent multiplier. Yet today we define happiness in our culture as finding the easiest path, doing the easiest thing to get the most benefit for the least amount of work or skill. And you said that tells me that we as a culture need to change the channel in terms of how we define happiness. And I was like, whoo, that is spot on right now.
Yeah, that, like I said, I love reading history. I love the Kennedy family history, because if you really think about it, he didn't have to do really any of what he did. None of those family members that served in public life had to do anything that they did. They could have just been chilling and, in Hyannisport or in Palm Beach and hanging out with Frank Sinatra and doing the things that a good socialite does.
Yeah.
But they would not have been happy. And, that level of inactivity, I think, is what makes people miserable, because we've all met people who are crazy, insanely wealthy, who hate their lives. And I think it's because they've become so conditioned to the comfort of what they have, they've never permitted themselves to be tested, where they can actually touch and taste the abundance that comes from multiplying your talents. And we see it everywhere right now. You can't turn on a TV or open social media without somebody complaining about, how we need a 4-day work week, and it needs to be work from home, but we need all the benefits and we need all the pay, and we need, as if like they don't understand how balance sheets or P&Ls work. It's just, well, it's just all just printed or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
small businesses are not the Fed. We have to go earn it and attract it. We can't just print it.
Yeah.
And the way that our culture has developed that way, I think, is super dangerous for our future, because we can't be the shining city on a hill unless we're shining.
Yeah.
And, I went and visited the White House after the book was published. I wish I'd added this to the book, but I went to the White House, and frankly, it was sad. We got to go to the White House and visit and do a tour and everything and walk through it. And I just know it felt like the spirit of the people there wasn't that excited. And I'm like, I've dreamed about the White House, seeing the White House, walking through the White House my whole life. My two takeaways were, America is still the shining city on a hill, but the lights are flickering. We're not what we once were in terms of leading the world with idealism and strength, and peace through strength. We've lost that part of our culture. My other takeaway when I was there is you see it online and it looks larger than life, it looks enormous, but then when you walk through it, you realize true, like real men and women lived here, who were men and women just like us. They woke up in the morning, they put their suit and tie on, they put their dresses and heels on, and they went and, made change through their work. They did those things. And I walked away thinking, we don't need to view this place as spectators or as people in the stands. Everyday Americans need to view this as a place of influence for the greater good, to be that shining city on a hill. And I think the farther that our culture falls into that easiest path, most amount of pay for the least amount of work, least amount of skill type culture, the further we fall and drift further and further and slide off that hill until we're in a valley where there is no city on a hill. Everybody's in the valley. And I make the point in the book that if America's not the shining city on the hill, then who's there? Who's next? Who's there to stop the advance of communism when it resurges again? Because it will. Who's there to be the protector for countries that get run over? Who's there to be that shining city on a hill if not for us? If not us, then who?
Yeah.
So I made that point in the book very strongly because I feel that.
Yeah. Well, and so last question, this doesn't have to do with the book, and then Linda, if you have anything, but with the recent incident that happened in the last few days, and Linda, the first thing I thought of was, oh my gosh, Linda's in another country and she's not going to know what's happening and she's going to wake up and freak out. And Adam and I were at dinner and I was like, oh my gosh, Linda's in Greece. But it's so sad. I thought, man, there hasn't been an attempted assassination on a president in 43 years in our country until now. And whether you like Trump or hate Trump, like that to me is a moot point. The fact is that it's sad. Like that it made me so sad that that's where we are. And so, Taylor, I know that you are, very passionate and smart and wise in the political field too. And I'm just wondering, like, any last thoughts on what we can do, like an everyday person, to help just bring unity and like unify a little bit better, regardless of, who you want to win in November. Because it's just so sad. How John Maxwell always says, like, he's just leadership sad. That's how I felt when I saw that. And I thought, man, like, this is horrible.
The first thing that we can all do is fight on our knees in prayer.
Yes.
I don't think that, even Christians enough lead with prayer. And I think if you start every day in prayer, like I write about my morning, like priming routine, it starts with that, because my default self isn't good enough.
Yeah.
None of ours is. If you just wake up and roll out of bed and go do life, you haven't like set the channel in your mind of how you're going to handle those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing I think that everybody can do, irrespective of which side of the aisle that they're on, is start the day in prayer and pray for peace in our country. The second thing that has to be done is the dehumanization of people has become so out of hand in our culture that's why some lonely loser who clocks out of Xbox hour in their mother's basement thinks, well, all I've heard for 8 years is this person is Hitler and they're a threat to democracy, an existential threat to democracy. Well, maybe I can be the savior of democracy by taking this person out. Maybe I can be the hero. So, and I think that it also comes down to our leaders being far more careful with their words, because words create worlds.
Yeah.
If you say something enough and you embed that idea enough subconsciously, it becomes your reality. And there are people out there with that derangement syndrome of thinking this caricature of a political figure is who they say that he is or she is.
Yeah.
They don't view them as a person with real ideas and a real family and a real love for life or music or travel or anything like that. They just view them as this character that's not a real person.
Yeah.
And so if we can lead with prayer and we can stop dehumanizing people for the sake of agendas, then we have a chance at survival. But my immediate thought, we were actually wrapping up Harrison's birthday party,
Yeah.
doing dishes and everything else. And I saw the notification pop up on my phone. I just thought, oh, it's protesters fighting or something like that. And I turn on the television, and there it is, the replay of the moment that it happened. And at that point, we didn't know that it just grazed his ear. I didn't know if it hit his body as well. I didn't know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But my immediate thought was, this is mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what the shining city on a hill looks like. And you can't be the shining city on a hill in mayhem. You can't be the shining city on a hill that the world looks to in mayhem, because now you just look like the third world.
Yeah.
Now you just look like every other country. So who's leading them? If the world is looking at us going, well, you're just as disheveled as we are,
Mm-hmm.
then who's there to lead? It creates this vacuum of a lack of strong leadership. And I remember sitting there watching. My other thought was, because right now, in our political culture, the leadership is pretty disheveled. There's no real one agenda. It's kind of scattered. It's blended. There's no rallying cry for the country in terms of unity. And I remember thinking, it was something that I wrote in the book when I saw him get shot. And that was when I wrote about President Trump. He had to fight within his own government the urge to go to war, just like President Kennedy did.
Yeah.
The reality is that is not the final action. The battle will go on.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the next generation to stand up against evil? I hope you feel a sense of duty when asked that question. I sure do. And I remember watching that thinking, if that shooter had succeeded, the next generation's not ready, because for far too long it's been complacent, saying, well, we've got our person, whatever. Well, they're not going to be there forever.
Mm.
And so I think if we have prayer, we stop the dehumanization of people,
Yeah.
and we have a sense of duty to take action rather than being spectators, then our country has a chance at resurging that American idealism that once made us great and can lead us to that greatness moving forward.
Yeah. Love
So
that.
true.
Yeah. So good. So good. Linda, any last thoughts or question?
Well, I'll have two last questions. One, what's a book that you would recommend? Dana, that's usually your question you ask.
Yeah.
And then my question is usually, who do you know that Dana and I should know?
Other than
A
your
book?
book, Taylor, because we're already going to blast.
We already got your book out there, yeah.
Yeah,
But what
we're
book,
going to blast your
what's
book
an
out.
impactful book for you?
I think, can I pick two?
Sure.
Okay.
There's never too many books.
Okay. So two books that I think have transformationally changed how I have operated and led. One would be Influence is Your Superpower by Zoe Chance. It's an amazing book. It's basically a book about how to connect with people, how to negotiate with people, and how to get to a yes without the 1980s always be closing style selling form of influence. And she has a magic question in the book. I'll go ahead and give that to you. But the magic question in the book is, what would it take?
Yeah.
And so anytime I end up in a situation with staff where it's like, we have big audacious goals as part of the flow state. And if I start to get some sort of pushback of, well, that's too high or we're behind or whatever, the question is always, well, what would it take to make that happen? And then reverse engineering what it would take. Well, if you do that sitting across from somebody who's maybe opposed to you and say, well, what would it take for us to work together? They will spell out exactly what you need to do to close the door on that relationship and that situation and make it work.
Yeah.
The second book that I can't stress enough is The War of Art. Not The Art of War, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
I think I have that book, but I haven't read it.
Well, break it out. You got to read it. It's a book. It ties into a lot of the thought of overcome the fear and anxiety to doing the things that you need to do, because I write in the book about resistance. That's what Stephen Pressfield writes about, is resistance. He had resistance as an author where he just wouldn't write. He would sit and stare and he just wouldn't write. And eventually he writes in the book about how he got to a point where he just said, if I don't write the book that I know I'm supposed to write, then there's no reason for me to live because I'm not doing what I was put here to do.
Wow.
And so it was just like this very hard, cutthroat, objective realization that he had with himself to go and write the book. And I think that's a super powerful book to help people take action. And I think that's really what, when I sign it to every person once they start working for our team, is you got to read The War of Art, and then we'll talk about it. And we got to figure out what it is that is your unlocked talent that you're letting resistance beat you down.
Wow. Love
So
it.
good.
Awesome.
So who do you know that we should know?
Who are you looking for?
Amazing, godly leaders like yourself that have wise wisdom to share with our audience.
Perfect.
Yes.
He's all throughout my book, and his name is John Wright Sr.
Yes,
Okay.
we need him, Taylor.
Yes. He's he started out as my business coach, and then he helped me. I think we 11x'd our business the first year we were working together.
Wow.
And now we talk a little bit about business, but a lot about pressure and faith and family and life and dealing with all sorts of different things. He and I actually read a book together called The Hypomanic Edge, which that's my third book. I don't know if we can do three, but the Hypomanic Edge. It's a book for people like us, Dana, who are that work every waking moment type people.
Yeah.
Where hypomania is basically controlled mania, where you are so creative and you have unlimited mental energy that it really needs to be honed in. And we read Hypomanic Edge together, where we would read it and we would talk about chapters and whatever, because I realized that when you are hypomanic and you're work every waking hour type person, you expose yourself to unnecessary risks. Because you just think everything's going to work out. I'm going to make it happen, and we're going to do this. I'm going to connect with that person, and I don't need to sleep. I'll just do all this, everything together. And Hypomanic Edge is a history book of people with that work every waking hour, audacious, ambitious type personality. And it's a history book of where they fell. And we now have the benefit of history in the modern age, because we now can look back and say, well, I'm like them. I see the mistakes they made. Therefore, I can learn from their mistakes and not make them myself.
That's
And
great.
so because we went through that book together, John said, okay, we're going to have to build some discipline into your work habits and your energy habits, where the phone has to go away at a certain time, or else the iPad has to go away at a certain time, the laptop has to go away at a certain time, or you'll just work through the night on these ideas that you have and this next big idea and the next big thing that you're working on. And I wrote a little bit about that in the book, but we were talking one day and I said, John, I'm physically tired. I'm not mentally tired at all. But I was on TV yesterday. I had a publishing meeting. I had a meeting with the publicist. I met with 9 clients. Then I did a podcast in the afternoon. And then all night I wrote my talking points for the next time I'm on TV.
Wow.
And I'm physically beat. Mentally, I'm fine. And he just said, okay, we got to work on this, because we don't want to crash.
Yeah.
And the greats have the self-awareness of okay, I got to pull back a little, because I can't burn it at the both ends forever. I got to have a little bit more control, so I don't have that. And so that's a third book that's been transformational for us. And you all, I would highly encourage you. I can make the connection
John,
for
I was
you all
going
to
to
meet
say,
John Wright Sr. and have him on.
That would be great, Taylor. Thank you.
Having him on would be an amazing guest. And I can tell you, it's I talk to him every 2 or 3 days. We have a scheduled coaching meeting every 2 weeks, but we talk every 2 or 3 days just about what's going on in the world or our business or stress or pressure or whatever it may be. And he would be an amazing guest.
That'd be
That's
great. Awesome.
Well, Dana, I can see why you were super excited. And what a great treat for me to come back from Greece all refreshed and start the morning with Taylor Davis. This is awesome. So, Taylor, real quick, why don't you tell everybody how they can find you, where they can find the book, all the good things.
Yes, and Taylor, we didn't even mention, but I mean, you also have a very successful career too when it comes to the financial world. So if you want to mention how people can find you in that area too.
Yeah, so we have a wealth management firm called Iron Guide. We're an RIA under the Meridian RIA. It's one of the top RIAs in the country. Great company, great people, and we've been focusing a ton on helping families kind of demystify investing and saving and retirement income. And it's the fun part about that is the people that you meet, because I meet people from all walks of life, and helping them solve problems is really exciting. And Iron Guide, I wanted the name Ironside because of the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, but the name was taken. So, which I think was also a God thing, because Iron Guide is more directly tied to planning. So the Iron Guide brand is we build impenetrable plans guided by expert advice. And that's our logo, is the USS Constitution, because it was impenetrable. It's still floating today. I got to go on it when I was a little boy. And so my parents definitely fed that side of my love for American history. But that's our thing there. And then the book, you can find it on Parable for the Republic. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's also resellers that have it now. There's like Books A Million, all these other places that are selling it now. And so I got a text from somebody on release day that said, "Hey, I wanted to buy your book this morning, but it says currently unavailable." And I'm like, "Oh, did I get delisted from Amazon? Or like, what's the issue? It's only been on there for like 2 hours." And then I got an email from the publisher saying, "No, this is it. It's not great, but the reason is great is because they sold out of inventory in 2 hours. So we got to overnight them more inventory to Amazon distribution to keep cranking it out." And so I was like, "Okay, well, how soon will it be back up? And what do the people do who get it?" But later that afternoon, they had the inventory there, so it was just delayed delivery for them to get it. But it's on Amazon. And then I'm on social media. Y'all can find me. My Instagram is @JTayDavis. I also have my author, J. Taylor Davis, Instagram, Facebook, that sort of stuff. And so I've got a lot of speaking engagements coming up here soon, where I'm going to work with our PR team to do the video content of speaking. So I want to speak at churches to talk to believers about multiplying their talent instead of burying it. And I really think the solution to a lot of our cultural problems, which I write about in the book, like if you turn on Fox News, there will be a set of reasons that things aren't going good. And then if you turn on MSNBC, there will be a set of reasons why things aren't going good. And the kind of confrontational take that I had in the book was, I think all these problems that we have, they're problematic, but they're more so symptoms of the real problem, and that is that far too many people are burying their talent. Christian passivity, lack of involvement, lack of influence, residing in the comfort of conformity is why we have a lot of these problems. And so having the content coming out here soon and going out and sharing that message is what I'm super, super excited about.
That's awesome. So love good. I got to get you to share it with some of my offices too. I know we talked about, so we got to get on that too. I just think it's such an important message. But I love the book, and you did an amazing job, Taylor. Linda, I can't wait for you to read it. You're good. I read it in a day and a half. Like, I was at the lake and just flew through it. Adam was like, "Holy cow!" It's a quick, easy read, and it is very, very impactful. So thank you so
I really,
much.
when I got your text message of your feedback of how it inspired you for the 4th of July post about how, you can separate church and state, but you can't separate God from government. I thought that was writing it, because you never know what's going to happen. And to see that it was published, it was made public. And then somebody like you, of all people, who I highly respect and admire, having that sort of impact, and then not just an impact of you saying, "Oh, this was helpful," but it helped you put something to action, was super energizing to me and exciting. And so I'm really grateful for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for writing it, because it energized me.
That's great. Yes. Thanks for putting your gifts into the world. So remember, if you have not hit the subscribe button, please go ahead and do that now. And the greatest compliment you can pay Dana and I is to pass this podcast along to anyone that you think would benefit from these types of conversations. If you have an opportunity, a challenge, a question, or a guest that you think would be good on the podcast, be sure and reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. So Taylor, thank you for a great interview. And Dana, I'll see you next week.
Sounds great. Thank you, Taylor.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.